Hello, my name is Aram Collier. I'm the head of programming at the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed our presentation of The Greatest Country in the World. If you are watching live from Cinesend and want to ask our guests questions, please send it through the Cinesend chat. There's a little bar above. You can put your questions in, and we'll get to those questions towards the end of our conversation. So, just wanted to remind you that all discussions, questions are subject to our code of conduct. And also join us on our realasian.com/film forum if you want to have a discussion over there as well. Really excited to have this discussion with Kee Nam Leduc, whose participation was made possible with the support from the CBC. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kee Nam. Hi, Kee Nam. Thanks for
Hi,
joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks
How
for
are you
having
doing
me.
over there? How are you doing over there?
I'm good. I'm good. Winter's coming, so
Yeah. Maybe you can tell the audience where you're joining us from today.
yes, I live and work from Montreal in Quebec. So here we are in a semi-lockdown. It's been a couple of months now. So I'm not allowed to see my parents these days, as
Yeah.
most of us, are
Yeah.
in the same situation. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're able to join us for this, and hope that you and your families is doing well and safe. Um, Definitely want to looking forward to this conversation. When we first met this summer, we had a little bit of a talk about some of the things, and kind of wanted to save some of those elements for our talk now. But I think this film is so fascinating to us, and I think what I mentioned is that this is the first Asian Canadian French language film that Real Asian has ever shown, a feature length film. I mean, we've had a lot of shorts and whatnot, so I'm definitely interested to talk about that a little bit. And so it's really a landmark film for us in that sense. But maybe we can start from maybe the beginning, some of the things that influenced you, kind of framing this film in this way. You have a right wing government that's taking control of the province. It's closed its borders. It's pushing out immigrants. What were some of the things? And you had mentioned some of this was influenced by when you grew up in the '90s and seeing your parents experiencing the referendum. So maybe you can take us through some of this inspiration for this film.
Yeah, for sure. My parents are Vietnamese boat people, so they're of the generation that had to leave Vietnam because of the war. After the war, so they left in '79. They arrived here in '79. Um, I was born in Quebec, so I've never lived in Vietnam per se, but yeah, I mean my whole childhood, my whole life, in fact, I've been hearing stories about their escape, right? Because that's, I guess, what people would remember most if they had to. Anyone who lives in such strenuous circumstances would talk. So there are myths and legends in my family about leaving that their country, right? And it was by no means an easy choice. I think most of them would have remained if not for the war, right? So and so that's something that permeated, and it's something that always stayed in my family. I mean, and I think that's true for any refugee family. I think once you have left the first country, but the country where you come from, there's a part of you where you would always need to be ready to leave again in case something happens, right? So, well, so as in most places, if things, in Quebec with the referendum, there was a lot of talk in my family about leaving also Quebec at that point. So I grew up kind of, my mother would, used to hide money. I think she still does. I don't, I tried to tell her not to do it because now I've been telling a lot of people about this, but but she hides money in the walls, right, in her closet, because cash money, because that's how you did, right? In case you'd have an emergency, you had to leave the country, you'd have to have at least a little bit of money or cash to get through. So and that's something that my grandmother used to do, and so that's something that's in our family. That this idea that where we live, it's might not always be permanent. They never took this place for granted, right? And the thing with the political situation in Quebec, it just makes it more. It's more of an issue, right?
Yeah, I mean it's so interesting, and I don't know the maybe you can talk a bit about the chronology of when you came up with this idea and how you developed it, because surely in the last several years, this film has become more and more kind of relevant and mirroring what is happening right now.
Yeah, because I think I first had the idea before Trump was elected in 2016. So I was looking for something to because I want this film is a film about my parents, about their generation. I knew in my life as a filmmaker I wanted to make at least one film about my Vietnamese parents, and so it's just that I didn't making a film about people on a boat, and that's impossible right now, and it's so expensive. It's something that I couldn't do with the means we have right now to make that kind of film. So I was thinking of a way to tell their story, but have it to be as resonant as possible in the present, right? I didn't want it to be like a film made in the 70s or anything like that, because then I will be dealing with costume issues and things that our budget don't allow, right? So. And this, as natural as it comes, Trump got elected, and I was like, hey, it's getting real close to us. How far are we in Canada to something that happening? Because I think before 2016 that would have been impossible to imagine, but now it is. I think now it is, and I think even though most of us would never see, and I hope we never see that happen in Canada, it certainly is a possibility. So if that happens, what would happen with characters like my parents, right? So I just took that fear they had, and I just tried to push it through the fiction of filmmaking, and to go maybe a step further and to see how they would react. And I think that was the basis of the film. And at that time, everything just gelled, and then Trump was elected, and I was like, okay, well, this is the right moment to make this film.
Yeah, it's one of these unfortunately timely films, like you never want to make a film because of that, right? But
yeah, of course.
Yeah, there's two lines that in the film that really stuck out to me in different ways, and I want to kind of talk about those for a second. One of the ones that I really relate to is Hien asks, they're sitting in the dépanneur talking to Fung, and he says, do you think I want to die in this frozen place? And so I mean, it's a little funny on the surface, because I'm not originally from Canada, and so it really resonates with me. I've been here for 15 years, but it's still so frozen to me. But I think this is also a very common refrain. I think, especially when in our kind of newcomer or immigrant imagination and reality too. So can you talk a little bit about that? And
of course.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question to that too.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think as everyone gets older, the Canada becomes, it becomes more and more unbearable, right? So we have the snowbirds, right, where people would just go down the States and spend their winters there. But I think when you come from elsewhere, there's always this idea that you might want to return eventually to that place where you came from. And I think most of us, that's something that talks to every one of us, Asian or immigrants or not, because I know a lot of my white friends don't come from Montreal, or if they do come from around Montreal, the city has changed so much so quickly that they feel like their home is something that doesn't exist anymore. So this longing for like home, for this place where we can end our life peacefully, that's really strong, I think. If you ask most immigrants, where will you think you're going to die? I think a lot of them would struggle to tell you that they would die here. In this new place, they have kind of they have made a new life in it, right? So, but a new life, it doesn't mean that you want to end it there, and it's the whole circle of life. I think most people want to die where they grew up, right? So I think that's something that's kind of natural. So it linked with his that character's desire to just go back to Vietnam and how he has to fight against that desire for something else.
And just to follow up on this point about winter is that this film is set in winter. It's a very cold film. I mean, you open walking through a forest in the wintertime, what was the thinking behind setting this film in winter? And also, certainly amongst the cityscape, it's very cold and, oppressive in a way.
We had a lot of snow. Yeah, we were pretty lucky because, the winters have been getting warmer, right? And everywhere, even in Montreal. So we wanted to shoot the film in winter because it just made so much sense with the political landscape of that dystopia that the film represents. So we wanted to shoot in winter. It was really hard, but we had a great winter. We had a lot of snow, and that's a gamble when you make a film in Canada. Is if you don't go really, really high up north, you're never sure you're gonna get snow the whole length of your shoot, which in our case we were lucky to have. So I think as I grew up, I learned that the closest I stayed to what I knew, and it's also because the film is obviously in Canada, right? So if people that want to see a Canadian film would expect to see snow also. So that's what I thought would make a lot of sense. Is it's to show people that this is a snow country.
Yeah, I mean, I was just really curious if it was the aesthetic choice or a circumstance. I was just like, when we were in film school, they would always say like, oh, you shoot in the wintertime because it's like there's not as much going on, you get cheaper rates, that kind of thing. So,
sorry, that's my daughter. Just he's playing with the glasses. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's
great. Around. Yeah, she's having fun.
So cute.
I'm so sorry.
No worries.
All right. Sorry for the disturbance.
Don't be sorry at all. This is one of the best things about being able to do this, right? We do talk about at the festival and all planning this year. It's kind of like the things that we miss or but it's also allowed us to meet more people, bring more guests in these live conversations, be welcomed into people's homes, and so by all means, it's like it's an awesome thing.
Yeah, my daughter just got new glasses, and we've tried to, because it's hard to have a small child wear glasses. She's 4, right? So we try to make it fun for her to have glasses on. So now she's experimenting.
No, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So no worries. So the other question, or the other quote that that really kind of struck me in the film, and I'm gonna have to paraphrase a little bit, but because I think it's longer than this quote, but it's when Hyung is talking to the real estate agent who's kind of his same generation, and they're looking at Alex, and they're kind of just like shaking their heads, right? And it says something to the effect of hard times make strong men, and good times make weak men, right? And they're talking about Alex, and also talking about themselves.
Yes, of course.
So what, I'm so curious about this sentiment, this line. It sounds. Am I right to think that this is maybe something you heard elders talk about?
Oh yeah, it's a constant issue and feeling, right? Because if you have lived through the war or multiple wars, as the Vietnamese community has, I think there's always a part of that generation's look on my generation, or their children, which they're pretty relieved that we don't have to live through the same thing, right? But the second part is they must be having doubts about our own characters, because we grew up in such relative comfort compared to their experience of life. So it was there, right? So but that whole quote actually comes from the alt-right movement. I've been doing research because I wanted him to have, because like we heard about the recent election in the States, how people were astonished that so many Latinos would vote for Trump, right? So So that's the real interesting question of it's not because you're an immigrant that you'll be polarized and just have one view of politics. So I wanted him to embody that kind of harsher, right. Almost he would fit in an all right environment because he has beliefs about self, the self-made glory of the individual and stuff like that, right? And he's pretty harsh. He's discipline is something important for him, and that kind of relates to what people from the alt-right would talk about. So that I took that from the alt-right. I gave it to him, and I think it just made a lot of sense because it is something that my father would be able to say, right? So it's maybe not in the exact same words, but the idea is there. It's you need struggle to make someone somehow stronger. So that's the idea of not having any struggle can make someone weak, and that's something that we can all kind of think about, right? and play with. The idea is easy to play with in our minds.
Yeah, it's this really kind of like kind of no-win thing for the kind of like your second gen or third gen person who grows up in North America. I would think about like my grandparents from China, like they escaped the Civil War, right? And they came to America. And I used to think when I was younger, it's like, oh, they didn't come here for us to, have these, have this really boring life or whatever. And then later on, as I grew up, I was like, no, that's exactly what they wanted for us, Like,
exactly, yeah. Exactly,
but it's true, like at the same time, it's like you can't win because you don't know what the things that they went through, so
exactly.
So it's super interesting, but that's interesting too because you mentioned that you wanted to make this film to kind of understand your parents' generation, and I wonder, and I think artists often use the form to try to make sense of things around them, their experience. So what were some things that you learned about your parents through making this film?
My dad is a big Trump fan, right? So and so I think by making this film, I try to be. It's really me trying to be closer to them and to put myself in their shoes, right? And I think it was and I think all three characters in that movie, all three men. Both the grandfather, the white guy, and the black kid. They're all parts of myself that I try to divide into three parts and have them talk together in some aspects. So it was really easy for me to write that Asian character, which is not my dad, but a lot of people that my dad knows and the people, that generation of people I know, and just putting myself in their shoes and going through, and that's what happens, because if I never wish that to happen, but if we have somehow to leave Canada because of political issues, I would be reliving exactly what my parents would be living through, right? So by going through the film, and making a film is like going to war, it's I think that's an unconscious decision in some of us, but I kind of expected this filmmaking thing to be really hard and really harsh and being like a constant struggle, right? And I think I also did that because I wanted to understand what my parents went through in a different way, right? It's because there's so many easier ways to live than to make films, and choosing that path of extreme difficulty and hardship and struggle, I don't think I would have done it without without the experience of the previous generation in mind, which is a positive thing, because I never gave up. As hard as I find it is to be a filmmaker, it's never as hard as getting in a boat with 500 other people and not knowing if you're going to survive, right? And just not having enough food, and just ending up in a refugee camp and stuff like that. So so my expectation of hardship is pretty high, right? So that's how I try to live. And it's also, I think the film is about someone that is kind of finalizing his immigration process, right? I think that's the most interesting thing for me is I think it could take 30 years. It could take a lifetime. And some people, it never happens for some people, but for some of us, we become Canadian. As weird as it sounds, right? But what is being Canadian? What is being Quebecer, right? So I think it takes a lifetime, if at all, if it happens at all, and for it to take the whole time, you need to be patient with people. You need to give them the time so that they can go through, and they have to make a decision, right? So that's the kind of decision you make it all the time. If you're a citizen of somewhere, you have to make the decision of being the citizen all the time. It's not a one-time decision that you make. So I'm kind of getting a little bit everywhere at the same time, but yeah, that's how that film, making the film, being a filmmaker itself, it's an heritage of what my parents went through.
And I assume they've seen the film, and what's their reaction, especially if it is
they haven't seen it yet.
They haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen it yet. No.
The festival runs until the 19th. No, just
I know. But I wanted them to see the film in theater.
Yeah.
That was kind of that's something else, because it's like a tempo of the cinema, right? So for them to see it in the tempo of cinema would have been great, I think. But due to present circumstances, that might never happen. So I'll just we'll see if I'll try to have them. I might just rent a theater for them to watch a film, something like that. Yeah, but
that's a great thing.
And I think it would mean a lot for them, right? For Asian immigrants of first generation to just go and see their son's movie about their own generation in the theater here in Canada. That I think that's a big step, and that's kind of something that I think it would be part of their process of becoming Canadian. That's and of myself, of integration.
Well, I hope they get that opportunity soon.
I hope so.
I hope we all do.
We hope we all do. Yeah.
I'm curious what you said about the three parts of yourself. That Hyung is you, Alex is you, and Junior is also you. So maybe can you unpack that a little bit, and like in what ways are they each you?
For sure. I think most of us, immigrants, of second generation immigrants, third generation immigrants, sons and daughters of immigrants, we all live with multiple identities, I mean, I'm another Kinam at home when I'm with my parents, when I speak Vietnamese with them. And that's something I read. It's a beautiful article in the New Yorker by Jia Yang Fan that she wrote in September, where she speaks about her Chinese mother, and how she thought she had this. She's a Chinese daughter of immigrants, so she believed that she had multiple identities that she could just put on as a costume. Here she is, the Chinese respectful Confucian Chinese daughter at home. And then when she goes to school, she's this, waspy, identity as a school girl, and English speaking and everything else. So I think that's all what we have to adapt ourselves to. And these three characters are three parts of me, I guess. There's this Vietnamese voice in my head, which is always pushing me to work and never to have any fun, because work is life, right? and there's no other meaning than work and material accomplishment, right? So, and then live to work, and every day. And then I grew up with and most of my friends though are not Asians. Most of my friends are white Quebecers of leaning left politically. And a lot of them, me included, are kind of lost in the present moment of polarization, right? And then there's this little child in me where when you come from when my parents they didn't really have any time for me. I mean I always felt like it was a wild child, an abandoned child. So so that child in the film who's kind of abandoned, and has to make way by himself, always resonates with me, and how I see my own childhood, because my parents obviously were working until very late at night, both of them. So we kind of grew up with my grandmother and eventually just my brother and myself alone at home most days, right? Most nights, most evenings. So so all of these three characters it's just different parts of my life that just came together into these three characters.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the actors too. We had talked about the casting process a little bit, and so Tan Tri Nguyen plays Hieng, right? And he's a longtime Quebec actor, right?
Yes.
And then so maybe you can talk a little bit about how you kind of came to work with him on this film, because I mean he's the core
He's
in
the
a lot
core
of ways of this film.
He's the core, exactly. He's the core, and this film, this film wouldn't have existed without him. I mean, it's just as simple as it was. He's been playing, in Quebec. He's been an actor in Quebec for many years, and he started really when he started, retirement, because he's an engineer. He worked for Hydro, and then when he retired, that's his life passion was acting and playing. So he started, doing tidbit roles and stuff like that around Quebec. And he did get some major roles, but never was he offered something in a feature film, as a main character. That would never have happened. And I mean, it kind of joined what you're saying, Aram, earlier, which is I'm not that surprised. This is the first French-speaking film from Quebec that you guys have at the festival, because there are not many Asian filmmakers in Quebec, and not a lot of them work with Asian actors because, well, they're just and many Asian actors. Tri was the only one, and he's a friend of our family too. He's a friend with my dad's, because most Vietnamese of their age apparently know each other, right? So I kind of knew it had to be him. So as soon as we got like some financing for the money for the film in, I started just regularly calling him, telling him, we're gonna make this movie. He knew there was a movie. He didn't read the script. I didn't want to show him the script. I just said, I have a movie. I want you to play in it. I don't have a script yet. Although I had one, I knew I wanted freedom to work with it, right? And just, I just want him to have it as fresh as, because that's the other thing. I didn't want to give him the script too early, because I know how Vietnamese people are, and I know how he is. He would have learned every word, by heart, and and then it would have been super difficult to move away and find something more lively on set, right? So I kind of hid the film from himself and had him read the film at the really last minute almost, so that he could be as fresh as I could have him be.
Mm-hmm.
But then for like two years preceding, or shooting the film, I was constantly asking him to be careful, not to get hurt, not to get into any extreme sports, stuff like that, because it was if he broke a leg, that was it, right? There was no film, we certainly wouldn't have shot the film, and we would have to wait for him to recover, because there's no one else in Quebec that could do that role.
Yeah, and
it was great, by the way. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, he's so great in it too. Like, there's this like real intensity, and it is that person who's seen things, but doesn't talk about them.
Exactly.
So he really embodies that in so many ways. It's really like I said, it is a landmark thing for us to see this film. So. And I think, if people are looking him up on IMDb, I think he's also credited sometimes as Sean Liu.
Yes, that's his actor's name. Sean Liu is how he's commonly known in the industry.
Yeah, just in
but
case.
We wanted to, because and he says so himself. it just makes it easier for people to pronounce his name and set and stuff like that. So because Sean is much easier than Nguyễn Thanh Tri, right? So so that's but that's the kind of things you have to do, right, to fit in in the society. Actually, in his case, it's just to have another name. Actually, yeah.
And also, can you talk about casting an actor for the role of Fong?
Yes, I knew Alice. Alice is she's very active, in many aspects. She's both an actress and she also is she's a host. She does talk shows and stuff like that. And she's also for a while she was on the board of UDA, which is the Actors Union in Quebec. Oh. She's she was just really engaged with them because there has been in Quebec a fight for more diversity in their ranks of actors, and that's obviously one of the big problems we have here is there are not many colored people in the books of the actors organization, and nor are there many interesting roles for them. That is kind of changing right now, which is great. But for years though, it was impossible to find anyone that wasn't almost impossible to find anyone that wasn't white. So so for the character of Fung, I just naturally approached her and I talked to her, and then she loved the project, and then she was on board. I'm sorry. So and that was it. I wouldn't even do an audition. I knew her work. I knew what she was capable of, and I tried. I spent a lot of time with both of them, so that their Vietnamese would be, because her mother comes from the north of Vietnam, which has a very different accent from the south, which Sean comes from the south. So we try to have them speak the same Vietnamese, but that again that's just me as a Vietnamese being wanting to go into the details, but that's stupid because my mother speaks Vietnamese from the north also, so it's completely feasible to have both accents in the same house.
Yeah, no, but it's a really important detail, because it's like if you're showing it to your community or your parents, they'll be like, hey, wait a minute, right?
Wait, what's up with that? Exactly, yeah, exactly.
And then just quickly, casting the roles of Alex Jr. and Rosaline.
Yes. This is a great story. We were looking for Junior was the hardest. After Sean, he was the hardest cast because honestly there were no kids, no black kids in the books that we could find, and so we went into wild casting, and we met just random kids at some point, to have them audition, and then I casted. Rosalind is the mother's character, and then she had a nephew, which is Shelby had a nephew. She said, my nephew, he's pretty interested in what I do. He's always watching my audition tape and stuff like that. So if you want, he could audition, and he was incredible. Junior was, and this is the first time he's been on screen. He's never played in anything. He's never been filmed by anyone. And he's a natural, right? So we were really fortunate to be able to work with Junior, and Junior is also his real name. It's just it's just kind of, and it was just a happenstance at that point. And then as we casted him and we started work with Junior, Shelby told us that she told us afterward that he's also been abandoned by his mother, and and she's actually he's her nephew, but his own mother just left, so he was brought up by his grandparents. So the film became very close to his own personal story, and that kind of, it made us a little uncomfortable at first because we didn't want to be exploiting any of that aspect, right? And this emotionally also, it's kind of, it's a hard terrain to step on, which is how far do you want to go into playing this part if this child is actually his own experience of life is being abandoned by his mother. So we really had to transform it into a game of some kind, and so it never, we never talked about his real life situation on set and stuff like that, and it just became a game that we played, making this film with him. So that was casting Junior and Shelby. As for Alex. Alex is Michael Gouin. Michael Gouin is fairly known in Quebec. You know, he's great. He was of all the cast, he was the only real professional actor, right? Well, the one with the most experience, because obviously the other two, you know, wouldn't have as much experience as Michael would have, and he really carried them through. He was, you know, helping them with their lines, helping them with, you know, how to be on set, how to keep your energy and stuff like that. So behind the scenes, he was extraordinary in just keeping everyone together, because there's a lot of insecurity, right? When you go and you shoot a feature film for the first time as a main character, right? So it's not given to anyone to be just go and, you know, do your stuff, right? So having Mikael's experience on set really helped a lot.
Yeah, and a feature film set is like no other. I mean, you mentioned earlier, it's like, you know, it's like going to war, and for actors, it's a lot of, you know, sitting around and then go, you know, and perform, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you just have all of these people looking at you, right? So I mean, it's great to hear that the actors are really supportive of each other. You know, you've mentioned it a few times in terms of, like, you know, the lack of diversity in Quebec media. You know, like we here in English speaking parts of Canada, or at least I can speak for Ontario, you know, like the kind of like French language media is just, it's a separate industry that we don't know much about, right? So and you are vocal about that need for diversity. So what are some of the challenges that you're finding? You know, like you spoke to casting, but what are some of the other things that maybe unique to the French language industry in Quebec?
Mm-hmm. Well, Quebec has its own star system with its own, you know, stars and, you know, A-list actors and stuff like that. So it's much easier to get your film financed when you have A-list names, you know, on your casting, and that's a main challenge in making the kind of films I make, which is up to the, you know, to the eyes of the institution, these are completely unknowns. No one of these, you know, like, who's Sean Lu, you know, and who's this Junior Jean-Baptiste kid, you know, and it's as sad as it is. There is quite an importance on in Quebec, but when they evaluate your projects to see if they are money makers, you know, if it's possible that they make a lot of box office. And if you don't have any stars in your cast, that's really hard for them to give you proper points for that. So it's kind of self-defeating, right? Because how do you want to have more diversity if your criteria for selecting projects it's based on success, you know, potential success, which is, you know, I don't even know what that means, right? So we have to fight. There's so many different fights, because the other fight, like you said, is just the casting part of it, you know. At many times in the casting of this one, I was like, why am I not just shooting with, you know, white French actors? I would have the best of them on set, you know? Mm-hmm. And it would be so easy, you know. I wouldn't be just doing some wild casting and meeting strangers to see if their children want to play in my movie, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like you're between the anvil and the hammer at that point, where, you know, they say diversity is important, but I have not seen any politics of helping diversity make films in Quebec. You know, apart from, you know, it's here we have the new rule, which is, you know, if you're a woman filmmaker, they help you a lot, which is, you know, again, 1+1, which means a producer can only push two projects at the same time, one by a man, one by a woman, right? Which is great. This is a new rule, and it makes it much easier for women filmmakers to have access to the production grants and money. But there's nothing that says anything about diversity, you know. So, you know, at that point, it's just it's just do your thing, right? And I believe that if we do that to help women filmmakers have access, I believe something similar must be done for the diversity aspect of the industry also. Because without incentives, you just have to be crazy or just do something like me, which is like, I just didn't care, you know. At this point, I was just like, I didn't care if this movie is a success or not. It had to be done, because if I don't try to help the problem and show more diversity on the screen, who else is going to do it? You know, mm-hmm. If I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. So I might as well just try to do it, and, you know, happens what happens. and then I'll go on my merry way and do something else with my life afterwards.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, I'm asking you what are the differences, but it's also not that different. You know what I mean? It's
No,
kind of
exactly.
like creatives of color having to do extra work, right?
Yep.
To and it's not always helping them put the work out, right? So
No, exactly.
yeah. So my question was about difference, but maybe it's very
There's
similar.
no, there's no difference. It's a struggle for everyone everywhere.
Yeah. We have a couple of questions that came in through people watching. I have more questions, but I'll save them if we get through these questions. So I'm just gonna have to squint a little bit. So the first question is, can you speak about the significance of the scene in the diner when
Yep.
Junior is asked to take a picture of the two Latin American men eating poutine for the first time? This is when we see the three refugees come together in one scene.
Yeah, I think the Latin American men, they were great. They're friends of mine, both actors, and this scene was so heart wrenching for us to do, and I think it's a beautiful scene because it's a film about immigration, right? But the only real true immigrants that we see arriving are these two men, and that's something I wanted to capture on screen because for the others, immigration is something that's far away in their lives, or was something done in the past. And I've always been amazed by my parents, how they tell their story arriving in Montreal for the first time, which is they were in a military camp for a couple of weeks for quarantine, right? So and then they were brought into the city, and they just saw so many lights and stuff like that, and I think that must be something so amazing to live a first experience when you arrive somewhere after a long trip. Right? We've been all through something like that. So having these two guys eat poutine and cry over the poutine is is and Jorge, the actor, is crying. He actually really cried. He cried for real, and we just couldn't stop shooting because it was for him, playing that scene was reminiscing of his own struggles, and how it was hard for him to just arrive here also, and to become someone here. So I think that meant much more than a lot of any other things I could have shown. Just two men sharing a first meal of something, a kind of mythic thing. The poutine is, for them, it's funny because it's so ordinary for us, but for them it's something mythical. And then they eat it, and they cry over it. Is it because it's bad, or or is it because it means somewhat that they have kind of arrived somewhere?
Great, thanks. There's a comment. It says, "I love the character Hien. Initially, he might appear to have the typical, quote unquote, typical Vietnamese refugee mentality, but I find his sensibility and his actions very dynamic. I find him very compelling. Bravo!" So that was a comment from somebody on the channel. The next question is, could you? So that actually, sorry, just with the comment, that's kind of like just like the old days when we would have somebody stand up. I don't have a question, I just have a comment. So that's
yeah,
nice.
It's great. That's nice.
So thanks for the
Thank you for the
comments,
comment.
people.
I appreciate it.
So the second question is, could you talk more about the concept of the rising right-wing government in the movie and how you came up with the concept?
Yeah, well, I read a lot of news, maybe too much, and that's something that's been happening a little bit everywhere, right? We have it in Germany, in France, with far right political parties starting to be more and more popular every year. Of course, we have that with Trump down south. I think in Quebec, it's and in Canada, I think it's very possible it happens also, because we all have the same problems, I think. And I think one of the main point I wanted to address in the film is it's that everyone's an immigrant, and more so the white man, and I feel like in The Greatest Country, the real immigrant character is the one played by Michael, which is the one who doesn't have a home, who has seen his country disappear, right, overnight, over elections. and then having his girlfriend leave, and then being jobless and being like, ugh, and how does someone like that not give into hatred, or just give into, like, sentiments of being denied or being stolen of something, and who are the people who stole that something from, from yourself. So that's something that's also here. I mean, everyone is an immigrant these days. The world is changing so quickly. Everyone's lost, and we're living this with COVID right now. But where the sense of community has been slowly dissolving everywhere. So this is the main issue of modernity, right? Modernity is great. We have computers. We can talk to everyone all around the world. But how is our community supposed to be based? What is it supposed to be based on? And where's that circle of people that we can kind of hold together and be strong together? That's not clear. So the right-wing government has this great platform of saying, hey, you know what? Here's how we can be together, right? Just being all the same ethnical origins. That would make it so much easier. And I think that's a real concern, and there's a real element of persuasion there. I mean, I understand. I want to try, because that's something I do try to understand where that comes from, and I understand the attractiveness of the idea of the far right, government proposals.
Yeah, and you see it in the scene with Alex's brother, right? And as this kind of like, analog to him, right, or a different path, right? And I think you really show the kind of like no-win situations that everybody else feels, and then and showing a lot of different sides. And Alex is this really kind of like aimless, hapless person, right?
Yeah,
and so,
exactly.
So yeah, I think it really comes through in a lot of different nuanced ways. So there's another question. So it's they're asking, how did you navigate conveying the complicated political questions of this film to the older Vietnamese actors and potential audiences? The person is saying, I was struck by how you said you made this film to understand your father's political views.
I didn't have to convey anything, complex, right? Because I think when you make a film, you just go like, well, you stand there, you say this, and then this person goes into the light and leaves, right? So you don't have to talk about things on a set of any political discussions are not something that you usually talk on set or with the audience. I think you get what you want from it. I try to give it. I mean, it's not the end of the world, because we've seen it with Donald Trump. It might be awful for a few years, but society is beyond political. It's also what we do in our homes, in our smaller communities, in our cities, in our neighborhoods. The political sphere is just one of many spheres which affects our life. So the film is kind of an answer to that, I guess, which is, maybe the political sphere might be completely awful, but if you can find another sphere in which you manifest solidarity and friendship and understanding and patience, that's how we can kind of counterbalance the whole thing. And I think that's more important than the political thing itself. So that's that's the dangers of ideas, because ideas are ideas, right? They're great. They're like viruses. A great idea just goes, it's like, what? It's like a meme, It's like Donald Trump is the main example of how memes and ideas can just travel really fast. But sometimes ideas just that. It's just ideas, and then you have your own actions in everyday life, which is way more important than these so-called ideas we have about what should be right or not. So, and that's, I think, the main point here is this main character has these really, right-wingy ideas, but how does he act? When is your real choice in life? Is it just when you vote, or is it when people that need your help come to ask you for help? And what do you do with that? So I think that's, being open to someone else, whoever that person is in life. That's not a political issue. That's just a human issue. And I think that's kind of what we wanted to get into with that film at the end, right?
Yeah. No, thank you. We have another one that came through. It says something about the scene where he uses the eggs that were thrown on the window to make breakfast was so touching for me. I was wondering where you got the idea for this scene. So it's in the beginning of the film. They throw eggs at the store, and then he picks them up and makes something out of it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a great. My aunt, I used to. My mother used to drop me at my aunt's convenience store. My aunt had a convenience store for a very long time in Montreal, in a very busy street in Montreal. And I was, as a child and more as an adult, I was struck by how they dealt with racism. Because most of the people were really nice with them, like really welcoming. Because after a few years, you're part of the neighborhood. It's not like they suffer through constant racism or anything. But for the rare instance where they do have racist things thrown at them or said to them, they just seem to push it aside. Like it was nothing, right? And I'm like, wow, how do you guys do that? and I wanted to illustrate that somehow, that this man, he would just give me some eggs. Oh, there's some eggs outside. I'll make something out of it, instead of just lamenting or being insecure about our identity and stuff like that. So that's his tough guy kind of attitude. So, but yeah, it came from being in a convenience store with my aunt and witnessing stuff like that firsthand, and seeing how she reacted, which was always with grace and with a smile on her face.
Okay, so thanks for that. That was one thing that Kelly and I, one of our other programmers, we talked about early on, and we loved that, and it's such a great introduction to him as well, right?
Yeah, to him,
yeah. So I'm wondering, we only have a few minutes left. I'm wondering, I know I sent you these questions earlier.
Yes.
I wonder if we can just power through them. So these are some rapid fire questions that we do on our Real-Asian Backstory podcast. And we totally stole this from Inside the Actors Studio, but they stole it too. So we're just going to ask you some really quick questions, and maybe we can just like fire them off and then we'll wrap. So,
Sure.
I'm curious, do you have a ritual on set?
I do. I have a little pouch. I have a little pouch in which I put everything that I need as a director to work with. So these include pens of different colors, many copies of the scenes of the day, because I always eventually end up losing copies of it. They include candy. And they include various types of food, and I just sort through my thing, put them into my little pouch, having attached in my belt, and then just sit alone, because it's hard to be in a set alone by yourself. It's easy to get drawn into the whole teamwork, making the thing. But as a director, I think you have to be as far away as possible from the technical aspect sometimes, because you have to just remind yourself to talk to the screenwriter, right? And when you're your own screenwriter, you need to kind of it's like
talk to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Time to talk to yourself. Go to talk to your past self, the guy who was writing feverishly and having so much fun writing the scene, right? And ask him what was important in that scene, and what is it you have to do to make that scene happen on screen, to be as close to the real thing, to the imagined thing as possible. So it sounds crazy, but I think it helps for me to dissociate myself into two Ki Nams, one in the present and the one in the past, who had a lot of fun on the typewriter or his computer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let me see. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I want to hit you with the hard ones.
Yes.
So can you name a game-changing film for you, something that inspired you or made you see film in a different way, or if you see your life in a different way even?
Yes, of course. I think it's easier to go way back to where I started to discover auteur filmmaking as a thing. And there are two films that I've seen when I was a kid, was a young teenager, that changed my life and made me realize that you could actually make movies as a pursuit in life. And that making movies wasn't just an American thing, because that's what, for most of us kids, making movies is like something that if you have to be in California to do, right? In Hollywood. and that you can't make any other because you have never seen any other type of films than Hollywood films. So I was shown a first film is Octobre. It's about the October crisis in Quebec, where a politician got kidnapped. It's a film by Pierre Falardeau. It's a great film. He came in school, he talked to us, and his passion and I still to this day remember some of his words, which is he talked about the career of filmmaker, which is like he relates it to being like a monk. So he says you're not going to be rich, but you will have something into which you pour yourself into and which you will believe, and if that's enough for you, that's going to be enough for your whole life. So that film was wonderful for me. And the other film, which really to this day it stays with me, I don't think it's a film that's really known outside of Quebec, but it's Yes Sir Madame from Robert Morin. He's a Quebec filmmaker. He's one of the best Quebec filmmakers we have ever had. Yes Sir Madame is wonderful. It's a film about Earl. Earl is a completely bilingual Quebecer, Canadian Quebecer. And the film itself is narrated in both languages. You know, it's a truly bilingual film. and it's the Earl becomes crazier and crazier, and his narration kinds of, you know, both English and French sticks together at first and then diverges at the end, and he gets completely and he talked about the really difficulties of conciliating different identities, right? And as a Vietnamese and as an immigrant myself, it really spoke to me about, wow, I'm having the same struggle, and this Quebec filmmaker kind of explained it on screen in a great way. So yeah, that's a film I would recommend.
No, that's great. I'll have to check those out. Now we also want to know, what's the film that is like your guilty pleasure? Like you feel kind of bad that you like it, but you still like it.
Well, I have a daughter, right? So it must be Frozen. Frozen is Frozen. I've learned to like Frozen. It's like it's the Stockholm syndrome, where you have to love your prisoner at some point.
It's for your own survival, right?
Survival. I find the songs are great. I mean, the songs make the film immortal because you don't care about the story. The songs itself, though, they can be replayed infinitely.
So which one is your favorite song?
I really like the third song, which is when Anna, Elsa's sister, sings of being alone on this Seminar Castle, and then there's going to be this. She's going to get crowned, right, as princess or queen. I don't remember the plot itself. So she's so happy. She's so happy because she's finally going to meet some other people, right? And she thinks of maybe even meeting the real one. And that's an excitement that I think all of us as humans have, you know, when when we go to a party or we're invited to a film festival, we go, oh, it's going to be so much fun. We're going to meet other filmmakers, you know, and people that love films and stuff like that. And I relate a lot to that song. Especially these days when we're all kind of in the same prison and Anna is in Frozen.
Okay, well, thanks for humoring us. Okay, we had one just last, really quick one. And you have to choose one of these. Rice, bread, noodles, or potatoes?
Rice, of course.
Rice, okay.
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Can't live without rice, guys.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, but really wanted to thank you, Ki Nam. Love the film, and it's been so great to get to know you before today, but also get to know you a little bit more through this conversation. But so thank you again for joining us. And,
thanks, Aaron. Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone for the festival. Thanks, Jamie. I've tried to speak slowly, but I couldn't do it because my English is kind of bad. So I'm trying to speak quickly. But then I tried to help you by speaking slowly, but I couldn't. So I'm sorry. Thanks everyone on the team. You guys are great. I love speaking to you.
So that's all we have time for today. But again, thank you, Ki Nam. Thank you, Jamie from Toronto Sign Language Interpreter Services. Thank you to our producers, Mimi Vong and Josephine Cruz. And if you'd like to discuss some more, check out our film forum. And just reminding you all that Real Asian is going on now until November 19th. Tickets still on sale, so join us on realasian.com. So please take care and stay safe, please.